what we're doing in this series, what we're doing all the time, is finding out what we do, because most of us have no clue what we do to start with, and then opening ourselves up to possibilities, because most of us are very attached to what we do, and it's difficult to open ourselves up to possibilities. So you know this all intellectually, but I'm reminding you because it's not an intellectual thing, it's an embodied process. See what you can find in these lessons, as opposed to seeing if you can solve the riddle or be really good at the challenge. Come stand up. See what you find in standing. Maybe close your eyes if that's comfortable. Okay, and then take a slow stroll with the space that you've got. First, notice the way that your head is positioned. In other words, how are you carrying your head? Because you're carrying your head, right? And could you sense the front of your head and the back of your head, right? Could you sense your forehead and the back of your skull? So that you might notice if the back of your skull tilts back or if your forehead tilts forward. And then start to play with what possibilities are there in walking and moving your head. So, ultimately you can start to get a sense of your happy place, right? As opposed to constantly dancing with where you lose your balance or you feel uncomfortable. Where is your habitual position for your head? Okay, and then stand where you are and do a different kind of movement. See what happens now when you completely change the way that your head is relating to gravity and start to bend forward, hang your arms forward, bring your arms toward the floor, bring your head toward the floor in front of you, and then come back up. And notice how you do that, leading with your head. And see how your head starts to bring your spine down, or doesn't bring your spine down. And then invite a bend in your knees, as much or as little as supports you, as though you were going to bring your hands to the floor in front of you, or for some of you that's very accessible and you would naturally bring your hands to the floor in front of you. So let your knees bend, lead with your head and let your knees bend as you bring your arms toward the floor in front of you. So how are you breathing as you're doing this? And then see if one time you can bring your head down but a bit to the right so that your two arms kind of dangle in front of your right leg. And let your knees bend forward as you hang your head and drape your arms to kind of frame your right foot. But you might find that if you bend your knees, that something changes in your pelvis. So instead of being stuck in your back, you start to move as a whole, an integrated whole, as opposed to just a head that is listening to a head instruction, right? You're a whole being that happens to have a head. Try it a few times to the left. So could you bend yourself, bend your whole self, lead with your head though, don't hold your head away from it. Do you feel more balanced to the right or to the left? Just stand for a second. And maybe it's helpful to imagine you as junior you, toddler you, or some toddler that you like. But can you imagine for yourself what it would feel like or be like? You're not going to do this, but just think about it, right? If you were to bend forward as you have been, bending your knees as you have been, but have your pelvis moving as fast as your head so that you would actually fall to your bum. See if you can picture that. So you still would bend forward, your knees would still bend forward, but your bum would be coming down as fast as your head so that you literally would fall, most likely, to your bum. And if you're curious to experience that or see what that feels like, you could play with it a little bit if you're comfortable to let yourself fall. But you're still leading with your head, right? Your head and your pelvis, which is what makes it really falling, right? Because we don't usually do that. We usually control ourselves in a different way. And then you could see you could fall and you could come back up. Or if you don't feel so comfortable falling, then you just keep playing with this idea of bringing more of your joints into the movement of bending forward. So if you were going to come onto the floor, you'd have more parts of you involved. Keep your head hanging. And like I said, it's just a curiosity, right? It's just make sense of the words, make sense of what you're already doing. Make note of how this process is for you. And then the next time you find yourself on the floor, come and lay down on the floor. Or if you're not there, get yourself to the floor, lay down. So find yourself there on the floor. How do you see yourself as a skeleton? What parts of your skeleton are the clearest in your self image? It's interesting how the way that you see yourself becomes the way that you use yourself. And then the way that you use yourself becomes the way that you see yourself. So when you see your spine, do you see it as a undulating thing, as a question mark shape? Maybe it's on some kind of diagonal kind of shape. Do you sense of your spine? And if you sense the lines of your legs, how do you sense them joining to the line of your spine? Do you see one of your legs differently than the other one? And can you connect in your sensing the lines of your arms to your spine? Where does that happen? How close is your head to the lines of your arms connecting to your spine? Can you feel what you feel against the floor, but imagine yourself standing? Could you imagine what would be different in your sensation if you were standing? And then how does your breathing enter into the picture that you have of yourself? Is that part of you? Is it part of your picture of yourself? It's a funny thing. Our breathing happens while we're busy doing other things. Our body moves while we're busy thinking about other things. But it's all the same damn thing. All happening in the same place. For your consideration, another element that forms our self-image is our fear. Not like, afraid of the dark necessarily, but afraid of falling, an innate fear of falling, an innate fear of humiliation, an innate fear of lacking in social approval. Injury. Yeah. So I would say most of us have some idea of what we're afraid of, what fears we carry. And then my experience is that there's also a lot of fears that we carry that we don't quite realize. And that's when we get into the biomechanic piece. So I don't know how many of you caught this last week, actually, what Pema said, which was brilliant, as most of the things that come out of her mouth are. And we were doing the head rolling in different movements and then coming up to stand. And to paraphrase what she said basically was she realized that she was fearful. She was doing the movement and she was fearful when it changed and she wasn't moving the way that was habitual for her. So many of our briefly, exactly. Well, exactly. That's the thing, right? It's that fleeting, and that's what's significant.
What will happen if I don't?
Right. So this is what we're looking at, right? Is there an element of limitation that you make on yourself in movement, in free, comfortable movement, based on, like she said, a fleeting fear of what will happen, or a fleeting fear of will I lose my balance, or whatever your thing is. Yeah. So I just want you to keep this in mind going forward. Because your back pain might be a fleeting fear of what will happen if I let my belly hang out. Or your shoulder pain might be a fleeting fear of what will happen if I lose control over all parts of my life, right? So, but now here we are back on the floor and feeling the weight of yourself on the floor so that you're safe, right? Here we are in a little container of safety. So see what it feels like to bend and unbend your right knee so that you drag your right heel along the floor in the direction of your bum. And notice what kind of habit you might have in your back or even in your abdomen, in your neck or your chest, somewhere else, that somehow disrupts a light flow of movement. And you can investigate that by changing the trajectory of your knee. When you bend your knee out to the right, is it different for you somehow than if you bend your knee straight up toward the ceiling? Can you sense a difference in your confidence or your belief in the movement? I mean, I'm abstracting here because you're all experienced at this, so I'm just going to go for it, right? And you can leave it and say, what the fuck does that mean? Fine. But I know that some of you will resonate, right? And so maybe fear is kind of a loaded word, but what if we just said vulnerability? Even just in moving your leg, is there some position of your leg that feels very comfortable and some position of your leg that feels a little vulnerable? Something a little weird about that. And maybe not. So let's switch legs. See how it goes with your left leg. Let your right leg rest. And how do you experience differences in something as simple as bending and unbending your leg? And then alternate. And add in bringing your foot up to standing. So you'll bring one knee, bend one knee to stand one foot. And then as you're unbending that knee, start to bend the other knee to stand the other foot. So one leg is always straight as the other leg is always bent. And then they meet somewhere in the middle. And you can play with your own timing, right? But where are you holding, right? Where are you controlling this movement? Do it a completely different way than you're doing it right now, right? That's the vulnerability that I'm talking about. Do it in a completely different way. You're super safe. You're on the floor. And then leave it, take a rest, give your poor brain a break. Listen for any sense of differences. Bend your two knees and stand your 2 feet. And see what it's like for you to do a movement of tilting your right knee left and right, but keeping your left knee quiet. And not because you're squeezing or contracting. And so if that doesn't seem possible for you, then you keep reducing it until maybe you just try to imagine it. How would it be to just tilt the right leg, right and left, as the left leg is quiet? It can be a very small movement. And what's different the other way around? If you leave your right leg quiet and you just do a little tilting of your left knee, left and right. Okay, now pause with that for a second. Just keep your feet standing. Take a little pause. Widen your feet a little bit more apart. Maybe you could imagine something like an elastic band between your 2 feet, between your two knees. And now, as you bring your right knee to the right, go as far as you can without stretching or straining. And you'll notice that your pelvis starts to turn to the right or roll to the right. And as your pelvis moves, it'll start to take your left leg a bit to the right. So follow the timing, initiate the movement with your right leg going to the right until that movement takes your left leg also to the right, and then return with both legs. And see how you're breathing as you do this. Notice the speed that you're moving at. And notice what you feel higher up yourself in your arms and your neck and your head. Is there any kind of changes up there as you're tilting your legs a bit to the right and coming back? And then keep going to the right, but change it up so that you're going to lead the movement with your left knee. And aim your left knee in the direction of the bottom of your right foot. As your left knee comes enough to the right, your right leg will also tilt to the right. Can you lean your left knee toward the sole of your right foot? And again, depending on your flexibility, if your feet are wide enough apart, then you might actually touch your knee to your foot or close to it. It's not a goal, but it's a direction. So just make sure that you're not inhibiting any possibilities. Does anything change in your spine as your left knee goes in the direction of the sole of your right foot? Let your two knees work as a team. So your left knee continues to go toward the sole of your right foot, and both of your legs work together to move to the right. And then both your legs come back. How does that movement travel up you? Is there anywhere you're fixing or limiting the potential of that movement? Take a little pause for a moment. And bend your knees and stand your feet. Bring your left knee to the left until your left knee kind of takes your right knee to the left. And then bring them both back. And can you just let yourself feel the feeling and have the activity of your mind, the doing, be the feeling? As though this is all we were going to do for the whole lesson, is just feel this feeling. So then you can notice the difference of the feeling if you lead the movement with your right knee going toward the sole of your left foot. There's a different kind of response in your back in this direction. And then again, can you feel the difference of working with your two legs as a team? So your two legs go to the left, your right knee goes toward the sole of your left foot. And you could even adjust the way that your feet are standing so that there's more potential for that trajectory. So that your left knee looks at the bottom of, your right knee looks at the bottom of your left foot. What happens to your right shoulder when your right knee comes toward the sole of your left foot? Okay, take a break, lengthen out your legs. Notice the way that you see yourself. Stand your feet fairly wide apart. Start to tilt your two legs left and right so that one knee comes in the direction of the opposite sole of the foot. So again, negotiate how wide your feet are, how close your feet are to your bum, so that that trajectory is the clearest for you. And it's interesting because it's different than just tilting your legs left and right. With your knee going toward the sole of your opposite foot, there's a certain kind of lengthening that needs to happen along the front of your thigh bone. And in a way, you might be able to experience that the lengthening of your thigh bone can continue up to your breastbone. And what do you notice about your head if you can pick up that length from your tilting knee? Okay, now pause for a second with your feet standing. Bring your right arm out to the right on the floor. Keep your left arm comfortable. Feel the way that your right arm's resting on the floor. And could you keep some part of your arm resting on the floor as you slide your arm out to the right and up toward the floor above your head? So your elbow might come away from the floor, your elbow might bend slightly, but just see what it feels like to do a movement of your arm out to the right and in the direction of the floor above your head, and then come back. And pay attention to what you feel lower down as you are circling your arm. Does anything change in the pressure of your feet? Now, if you're not already, add your head into the movement so that as your arm comes up above your head or in the direction of above your head, you start to turn your face to the left. Can you keep the movement simple? Can it be a movement of your arm and your head, or do you feel like you need to use another part of you to do that movement? How does it feel? Is it a good feeling? Leave your right arm quiet and see what that movement's like with your left arm. Maybe it's easier or more complicated. Circle your left arm out to the left in the direction of the floor above your head. Do your own research to see what changes if you turn your face to the right as you're circling your arm above your head. Now remember, the biomechanics, this is not rocket science, right? And most of you have done this work before. The question keeps being, how do I interact with my own experience? How can I keep connecting, keep coming back so that the sensation that I'm having, the moment that I'm having is my focal point? So you practice focusing on your sensation. So keep going with the arm in a nice, comfortable way, reaching up in the direction of above your head, and then listen. Go slow enough that you can feel. Right, your arm is connecting to your shoulder, to your upper back. There's some kind of little turning that happens. Right, your left shoulder starts to come a little bit away from the floor. If you wanted to keep bringing your arm to the right. So see if you can follow that feeling down your upper back so that you start to tilt your legs to the right at exactly the moment that it helps you reach over to the right. So play with the timing of it. Play with the comfort, maybe even the pleasure. Can you let your left knee go toward the sole of your right foot as you're circling your arm, your left arm up and over your head until you will come over onto your right side? And then notice when you reverse it and you get back onto your back, do you initiate the movement from your arm or from your legs, from your back, from your belly? Okay, take a little rest. And then try it the other way. Have your feet standing wide apart. Circle your right arm out and to the right and toward the floor above your head. And listen for the timing of tilting your legs to the left to take you onto your left side. Can you play with this relationship of knee in the direction of the sole of your foot, your right knee in the direction of the sole of your left foot, right? Why is that important? Why is that significant? What's different if your legs are close together and you do the movement? Pause for a second. And then sit up with the soles of your feet standing and your hands behind you. Have your feet standing wide apart so that you can start doing the tilting movement of bringing one of your knees toward the sole of your opposite foot and then come back. Let your 2 feet tilt. And where could you keep your hands on the floor as you are tilting your legs and your pelvis? Close your eyes. It's interesting, right? It's interesting that it's difficult for a lot of us to keep our hands on the floor. But why is it difficult? Right? What's stopping you from keeping your hands on the floor? What are you doing with your chest as you're tilting your legs? Make sure your hands are fairly close to you. And look in the direction that you're tilting your legs. Look over that shoulder. Mm-hmm. And notice that there's a certain amount of rotation that needs to happen in your upper back in order for you to look over your shoulder, right? So don't force that, right? Keep your 2 hands on the floor and only go as far as you can. With your hands on the floor, your shoulders are fixed, right? That's a constraint. So it means that instead of going into your habitual pattern, there's more possibilities for how you're going to organize yourself in this movement. Now see if you can lift your chest as you tilt your legs to the side, and then kind of soften your chest as you come back home. Lift your chest as you go to the side, and soften your chest as you come back home. How do you use your breathing? Keep your hands close to the back of your hips. And if it's a little bit frustrating, it's likely a little bit frustrating because it's asking you to do something that's non-habitual, right? We don't always want to, we don't want to do that. Can you look opposite to the direction of your knees without straining your neck? Okay, rest on your back. If you just want to look at basic mobility, walking down the street, where a lot of us end up sort of complicating things is with our increasing inability to integrate through our trunk, through especially our upper back. So that a lot of times when you run into knee or hip problems, it actually has more to do with a stiffness or an immobility in your trunk than something particular with your legs or your pelvis. Stand your feet and interlace your fingers behind your head. Here's an iconic Feldenkrais movement that never stops being important because it teaches you about your back. So have your elbows forward toward the ceiling. Your feet are standing. And where could you fold your back? Where can you bend your back in order to have your head come a little bit away from the floor, lifting your head a little bit away from the floor with your hands? by bending your back. What part of your back do you bend? Point your elbows toward the ceiling. And then you're going to lift your head with your hands. But the idea is that you do it by bending in your back, as opposed to tightening in your abdomen or in your chest. So what part of your spine goes down into the floor? The image could be a folding. If you're folding the top of your back into the bottom of your back, what part of your back goes into the floor when you lift your head and then softens a bit when you bring your head back down? That's the $1 million question, honestly. Pema, just in case you guys didn't hear that on Zoom, Pema just said, so are you pulling your head with your hands? Or would you say, are you
using your back?
Or are you using your back? She says. And I said, yes. Ask yourself that question. Are you pulling your head with your hands or are you using your back? Okay, leave it. Does it affect how you lay on the floor? Lengthen out your legs for a sec. Did your brain just notice something about your back? Maybe yes, maybe no. Just checking to see. This time, bend your knees, stand your feet, but hold on to your two knees from the outside, the tops of your shins from the outside. Exactly, yeah.
The feet on the floor?
No, not your feet on the floor. Sorry, yeah. Keep your knees in towards your chest. Hold on to the tops of your shins, just below your kneecap. I just heard in a recording that they said below as opposed to under. I was like, oh, below. That seemed below your knees. That makes sense, right? No, that would be under your knees. So that's the confusion. Anyway, there, you've all got it in the right place. And then don't hug your legs together. Let your legs come comfortably apart. And first see what it feels like to bring your two knees more towards you, but keep your arms straight. And notice that if you have your shoulders fixed, that's going to be pretty weird. It might be weird anyway. But notice that with your arms straight, it's like your arms are two sticks that go between your shoulders and your knees, right? Exactly. So that there's a potential that as your knees go a bit toward you, your shoulders go a bit more down into the floor, don't they? You're holding onto your knees. Your arms are like sticks, right? So that distance stays the same and it's small. But as you bring your knees a little bit toward you, unless you're holding your chest in a certain way, you could potentially let your shoulders go more toward the floor, right? That's a good idea, actually. Right, the opposite of that. Everyone loves the opposite of that. So if your knees went away from you and your arms are straight, do you feel how your shoulders could come a little bit away from the floor? Maybe, maybe not. You just see if that's a possibility. And then bring your knees a little bit in toward your chest. But now see if you can, actually, no, sorry. Rest for a second. Stand your feet. Sorry. Go back to the tilting movement. Tilt your knees to the right, so your right knee comes toward the sole of your left foot. Come back. Tilt your knees to the left, so your right knee goes toward the sole of your left foot. See how this movement's feeling for you. Okay, now leave that. Hold on to your knees. Hold on just below your knees with your two hands. Your feet are in the air. Your legs are comfortably wide, not hugged together. You do something similar so that you bring your right knee to the right until your left knee follows. And you might start to roll onto your right side. And then can you reverse that? Bring your left knee to the left until your left knee brings your right knee to the left. You're holding onto your knees. You bring your right knee to the right or your left knee to the left. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, either way. Go ahead. Left knee to the left. Yeah. Yeah, you can come onto your left side, right? Why hold yourself? And then come back. And then bring your right knee to the right until your right side, it's gravity. It's gravity, right? As you bring your right side enough to the right, it's going to take your left side. You bring your left side enough to the left, it's going to take your right side. So feel that relationship that you have with gravity, noticing, of course, if you have a habit of fighting gravity. Can you have fun with it? Can it be a little bit more playful? Some of you are still like super serious about this. Like this is a really serious business. Do you have to lift your head from the floor? Or is that something that you are just doing unconsciously? Really switch the engine, right? So that you could even push, let's say push your left knee into your hand as you're going to the left. And then push your right knee into your right hand as you go to the right. Yeah. So you're really leading. You might even lengthen, exactly. You might even lengthen a bit. There we go. Oh my God. Might even lengthen a bit through the right knee or through the left knee, not differently from how you were doing it before when you were on your back. Make your thigh grow longer. And then make your other thigh grow longer as you go the other direction. Why do I keep insisting that? Don't do that. Keep your knee hugged into you. Keep your two knees hugged into you and roll left and right. It just as a comparison, if you can feel anything different in your back, if you roll with your knees close to you, or if you roll by pushing your knee away from you. All right, give it a rest. Come on your back. See how the floor is shaping up. So I'm pushing the limit again of your attention with these explorations, right? And this is me getting out of actually doing a weekend workshop. Is okay, what if I make this 4 series a little more workshoppy? So as usual, if you're spent, you're spent, right? It doesn't offend me if your bandwidth is if you're done, right? So just keep playing if you can pay attention to what you're doing. It's very simple. Yeah. No judgment on your attention span. We're all the same in that way, ultimately. So, but if you've got a little bit more juice or a little bit more curiosity, come sit up in side sitting position so that you have, again, notice the similarity, sole of your right foot close to your left knee. Left foot close to your left hip. Put your hands behind you on the floor. And see, could you keep your feet comfortably connected to the floor, but switch the direction of your knees? And so start to investigate. What do you have to do to keep your hands in contact with the floor? Can you switch your knees while keeping your hands on the floor? Now add in a deliberate lengthening of your spine and a rounding of your spine. So when you shift your knees to the side, let's call it arch your back, lift your eyes toward the ceiling. And then as you bring your knees back through the middle, round your back, look down at your chest. It'll be really hard to do this with your back if your arms are too far away from you. So keep checking that your arms don't start to walk away from you. So what does it feel like to round your back like you were just doing on your back? And then arch your back like you were just doing on your back? And then pause with whichever position's easier for you, whichever side sitting is easier, and put your two hands on the floor in front of you. And again, if that's not accessible to you for whatever reason, then you don't. You have your hands in your lap, you keep your hands there, you adjust yourself as you need to. Yeah, so you're inside sitting, that's right. And then you just see, right? Keep thinking about your spine. I'm just giving away all the answers in this lesson. Yeah, exactly. And see what it feels like now if you arch your back as you slide your arms forward. Slide your arms forward and arch your back. Look forward. And then come back. And again, if you're having your hands on the floor in front of you is not accessible, just keep your hands in your lap and do something similar. Just do a slight arching of your back and side sitting. Yeah, lift your chest, lift your head. As you're sliding your arms forward. Try a few different directions. Try in the direction of your knees. Slide your arms forward and lift your chest and your head as you're sliding your arms, like whee! That's the sound that movement makes. Is it easier for you if you round your back as you reach your arms? Try that. Could you, oh, Simon got smart. He put a slidey thing under his hands. That's a good idea. But if you have a inertia problem, grab a blanket. So can you look at your own belly button as you slide your arms away from you? Remember where we started this lesson when you were standing and you were dropping your head. Take note of which direction your knees are going, and then come and lay down on your back. One last time, stand your feet. Whichever way you just had your knees, tilt them that way and come back. If you can't remember, just see whichever way feels more comfortable for you. Tilt your knees either direction and then come back. Do that several times and notice the way that movement's traveling through you now. Does your back arch or does your back round? Does your head move? Does anything happen in your upper back when you tilt your legs to the side? So if you're tilting your legs to the left, you'll work with your right arm. If you're tilting your legs to the right, you'll work with your left arm. And just like you did before, as you tilt your legs to the side, circle your opposite arm out to the side, up over your head, roll onto your side, and then reverse it. Keep your knee oriented toward the sole of your opposite foot. And notice when you come onto your side, is your spine arched or rounded? So you circle your arm along the floor, out to the side, up above your head, until the movement of tilting your legs and sweeping your arm takes you onto the side. If your legs are tilting to the left, you sweep your right arm out to the right, up over your head, until you roll onto your left side. If you're tilting your legs to the right, you take your left arm out to the left, up over your head, until you're resting on your side. So at all times, the arm that you're not laying on is the arm that's moving. Notice that your legs are still coming into side sitting position unless you're not keeping your knee toward the sole of your foot. So if you can do that without any strain, then what would happen if you were to come up to side sitting? And then Could you reverse that? So more or less your feet stay where they are and you're tilting your feet, you're tilting your knees. One knee goes to the sole of the opposite foot. If you're tilting your legs to the right, your left arm circles around and up over your head until you're on your right side. And then you might be able to push yourself up to sitting. Can you reverse that by bringing your head down first? Lean onto your elbow, lean onto your shoulder. Can you reverse it the way that you created it in the first place? Okay. Notice how this is similar to where we started. Your head goes down, your spine follows, and your pelvis responds to your head. And there's the little piece there about a fear of falling, right? A lot of us are really used to using our arms and our chest to support ourselves, so much so that we lose our ability to change our position with our pelvis. Exactly. So you play until you're done and then you rest. But don't push yourself. When you're done, rest. And feel the version of yourself that you feel when you're resting on your back, with your legs long, your arms by your sides. Is there any relationship between the sensations and your thoughts? Maybe it's fun to play with it again once you restore yourself. Maybe you're done and ready to move on. Either way, it could be interesting to see how you can incorporate that movement into coming up to stand. Thanks for being here. So enjoy. We'll keep going with this next week.